quiero dar la bienvenida a este panel, a esta masterclass llamada ¿Cuál es el costo real de hacer documentales?, en el que Bruni Burs, consultora del Sundance Documentary Film Institute, junto a Isabel Arrate de IDFA Berta Fund, también junto a Sean Flynn, cofundador y director de programas del Festival Internacional de Cine de Camden y de Points North Institute, y también van a ofrecernos una conversación en torno a cómo se están financiando los documentales hoy en día, cómo han afectado a la realización de documentales fenómenos mundiales como la pandemia global del COVID, el costo globalizado, el alza, perdón, del costo de la vida, y todos los aspectos emocionales y financieros de realizar documentales. Moderará esta conversación Jane Mote, del Fondo Británico de Wickers, cuya encuesta The Cost of Docs es el punto de partida para esta conversación. Lo siento, sí, perdona, Kisha. Perdón, me faltó también presentar a Kisha Knight, que es de la Asociación Internacional de Documentalistas, IDA. Decir que nos están viendo en vivo por el canal de YouTube, @ccdocumental. Y también debo mencionar, antes de proseguir con la conversación, y agradecer a nuestros financistas, sin los cuales no sería posible Conecta, el Ministerio de las Culturas, las Artes y el Patrimonio, a través de su programa de apoyo para organizaciones culturales colaboradoras, ProChile, también Chiledoc, la marca sectorial del documental chileno, la Cooperación Regional de Francia, la Embajada de Francia, la representación Valonia-Bruselas, que es parte de la Embajada de Bélgica en Chile, y también la Corporación Cultural de Ñuñoa y la Sala de Cine de Ñuñoa. Eso, muchas gracias.
Thank you, and apologies for the lack of English. I hope everybody has their little translation for my part anyway. Thank you so much to Chile Connecta for having us here and inviting us to be part of this opening panel. It is fundamental about where the money comes from, but also where the cost of documentary leaves you as filmmakers, because sometimes we give too much and we don't get enough back. And so what we want to have today is discussion about how funds can be more helpful to you, but also how you can help yourselves to be more generous in how you fund yourselves, how you look after yourselves when you're making documentary. It's a long journey, and it's one that can be very lonely sometimes. So we hope to give you some ideas to make it more enjoyable and more profitable in some ways. So the Wickers is a fund for first-time directors across the world, and we find that a lot of directors don't know their way around yet. So we felt it was important to ask directors how they found their way through the documentary system, and we also wanted to make sure that our fund was relevant and big enough for making a difference to documentary makers. So when we launched 10 years ago, our top award was £80,000. It's now £100,000 because of the cost of docs. Because this brochure that we create every year, we ask anybody from around the world can take part and give their thoughts on what the cost of documentary is to them. And I'm going to go through very briefly what the findings, the key findings were for the 2023. And then I have some early headlines from 2024. And then we'll have a discussion with the funds here. And then we're going to ask for your questions. And obviously, the questions can be in Spanish because I have my translation. And everyone else here is better than me, so they speak Spanish. So let's just look at the top findings. And we mainly speak to directors with this. And obviously the biggest finding is, and for those who are looking back at the screen, I'll try and give you some idea about what you're seeing on screen, the biggest finding we have is that people lack funding. And what do they do when they lack funding? The first thing that they cut is the money they pay themselves. So a lot of people who are making documentary will pay the crew, and they'll pay for the archive, and they'll pay for the music, but they don't pay for themselves. And even when they get funding later, maybe they don't count this. They also have to have other jobs. They also have to live off their student loan if they still have one. And it's very, very difficult for people to make it sustainable. And this is something we're very concerned about. So just look at the next slide. And this is just a quote. Everything is more expensive, but budgets from funders and broadcasters are flat. So the quality suffers. And this is what I was saying about the Wickers. We have to listen and we have to increase the fund. We also do a podcast fund, and that's gone from 5,000 to 15,000 now. But the funds don't have limitless money. So we have to constantly question, what do we give? How do we give it? Does it make sense? But there's a big complaint about broadcasters as well, because broadcasters say they don't have any money, they're being squeezed and so on. And I've seen some broadcasters around the audience. But the fact is, without your stories, they don't have a TV channel, right? With the streamers, without your stories, they don't have a commercial business. So they have to think about how they structure their business going forward. So, how much were you paid for all of the days that you were working on your documentary? Well, the good news is when we started the survey in 2019, the majority of people weren't paid for all of the days. Now 63% are paid, which means there's still over a third of people who are not paid for every day that they work on their documentary. So when we come to the questions, you can talk about how much money you can put in your budget to make that figure work. Obviously, the cost of living in many countries around the world, and during lockdown as well, many funds were tight. That affected people's ability to make documentaries. It's had a major impact for the majority of people. And unfortunately, some people have stopped making documentary because of this. We don't want to be depressing, but we will talk about what that means for the industry as well. So this is a quote from somebody saying that they've had significant debt to work on the documentary. And, you know, and it's not sustainable. And one of the things that I really worry about is people with families, people who have to support others. Does this mean that documentary is not for them? So what can we do to support people in different ways? And there are some ideas coming out from different funds about this. So one of the questions we asked is about mental health, because we're not just talking about the cost of a documentary being monetary. Are you looking after yourself? Are you looking after your protagonists? And that a lot of the people who we surveyed felt that they had a need for mental health support. They didn't know where to go. And we'll have a discussion about some of the places that you can go to, and whether funds appreciate you putting some cost in your budget for mental health support. Because sometimes people don't feel it's appropriate, but we can have a discussion about whether the funds that are here would feel that was a good idea or not. And then broadcasters need us, but how come they're not pitching to us? We have to go around like beggars to them. So this was a controversial quote, which I actually did a presentation, and we're now working in partnership with Al Jazeera. And we used this quote in the discussion, but they've translated this survey this year for the first time into Arabic. And I actually have some interesting now results coming through, what the difference is if you're in Arabic-speaking countries. And one of our ambitions would be to get this translated into Spanish and then into other languages, so that we can really make sure that we're understanding what's happening in the industry. But it's really difficult if you don't have many choices of where your film can be seen. So, We have some early findings from this year's survey. It's not been published. It will be published in January. And it's 30% of the documentary makers are still living off savings. And those with full-time non-filmmaking jobs have doubled. So that part has become a problem. Documentary makers value their time more than in past surveys, but 60% are still not paid enough. And documentary is taking longer to complete. So only 26% are finishing their films within 1 to 5 years. And this is a problem for people if the film goes on and on and on. The emotional cost is still high. And we also included a question this year about whether people felt safe in the industry, because I've been involved in something called #DocSafe, where we were uncovering abuses in the industry. And one of the interesting questions about this was power imbalance. And I think in this, we have most of our respondents to the survey are in the global north. So only 10% of them reported a power imbalance. But when we come to the Al Jazeera results, which are mainly people in the global south, it was 90% thought that there was a power imbalance. So there is a problem between global north and global south, and where the funding is, and where your producers are when you're going for co-production, and what do we do about the power imbalance? So yeah, we have, that's a very brief look at what we found out from the survey. And I think what we need to do now is to find out from our funders how they respond to the survey, and I can feed some more questions to them. But I wonder if we can kick off with this. Are you all, we'll go one by one, we'll start with Isabel, because I can see her easily through the flowers. Whether you find that there's been a trend where documentary directors and producers are not paying themselves properly, and whether, when you, in your time in Bertha, how you would react to that, whether you would try and change that dynamic.
I wouldn't, oh yeah, now I get confused.
Speak in Spanish.
I have to speak in Spanish.
Well,
yeah.
you speak in the language you feel comfortable in.
Yeah. Switch. Yo no diría que es una tendencia, sino que es algo que ha sido parte de la realidad que yo he visto con proyectos desde hace, que son 22 años, que llevo trabajando en el IDFA Bertha Fund. Y en realidad, porque, digamos, el hacer documental siempre viene con mucha motivación, pasión y convicción de querer dar luz a una historia, a un proyecto. Y para realizar eso, la realidad desde en los países donde trabajamos con el IDFA Bertha Fund siempre ha sido que la gente no se paga. Nosotros hace 15 años apoyábamos proyectos que tenían un presupuesto de 50.000 euros y que eran los 50.000 euros que necesitaban en Irán o en India o también en países en América Latina para pagar la postproducción y para pagar las facturas, las cuentas que tenían que pagar. Y claro, uno no se factura a sí mismo, entonces no estaba en el presupuesto. Y eso es algo que yo creo que el cambio que yo he visto es en eso, que la internalización, la globalization ha cambiado esto y los presupuestos están más altos y la gente sí está tomando en cuenta esto, pero obviamente sigue siendo que con los años que se invierte en desarrollar un proyecto, en producir un proyecto y realmente llevarlo a terminar, eso nunca se ve reflejado en un presupuesto, el costo real. Todavía no. Digamos, en ese sentido, los resultados de la investigación no me sorprenden.
Not surprising, but
No.
can we do anything about it? Keisha?
Thank you. So agree with Isabel. Also just wanted to note that as an international fund, we look at budgets that range from 150,000 to 1.2 million. So it's really difficult to understand what each budget means. And usually when the budgets come through, they will show everyone getting paid. And when I meet one-to-one with folks around the world, I tell them, up your budget. Like, just pay yourself what you want to get paid, make it be a document that, you know, we can see kind of what the full scope is. But the reality of that is very different. And one of the things we did, it's just a small thing, but it's one step, is that in our funds, even though we have production funds, if people are further along and are applying to pay themselves for pay they didn't take, deferred payment, we allowed that to happen to just try to make things more flexible. So that's one thing we've tried to do.
Creo que en relación a eso, lo que fondos como los nuestros pueden hacer es no tener demasiadas exigencias en respecto al presupuesto que uno aprueba, para dejar la libertad, como lo que dice, poder hacer lo que dice Kisha, pero también buscar otras maneras creativas, digamos, para no solucionar, pero por lo menos tratar de acercarse más a un pago real.
So Bruni, how do you manage this? Do you look at budgets and try to find out if there's enough in there, or do you just accept it for what it is?
No, sí, no, nosotros investigamos todos los presupuestos y obviamente depende del país, de dónde vienen y de la producción. Y para Sundance ahora nosotros tenemos un límite hasta $1 millón. Para mí este es muy alto, pero nosotros con nuestras becarias investigar mucho más profundo en sus presupuestos cuando recibieron un grant para hablar del budget y todo. Pero como dijeron Isabel y Kisha, no hay una fórmula mágica, no hay una fórmula mágica, pero es muy importante para hablar con las grantees becarias y hablar qué está pagando para ustedes, para el equipo, para la directora, el equipo. Si a veces hay un colectivo, este es difícil también.
But it's quite difficult because the budget sometimes tells the story of the filmmaker and their level of expertise and so on, just as much as the trailer or the written words. So, and we don't pay a lot of attention until a bit later. So I suppose, how do you encourage people to be as honest as possible in that process?
Para mí en el inicio, revisar muy fuerte el presupuesto. No siempre con todos mis colegas, pero para mí, porque tuve un poco de experiencia más internacional en Medio Oriente, también en América Latina, y de dónde será la producción. Pero sí, en realidad no hay suficiente atención a esto.
So Sean, you work for an organisation that is also supporting filmmakers at an early stage, and are you finding any changes in how much they put in for their own costs?
Yeah, I mean, I think similar to Kisha, we're accepting applications from all over the world, so we see a really wide range of budgets and a lot of different ways of approaching filmmakers compensating themselves. I would say, for the most part, we're seeing people writing in, salaries for the director line and the producer line. I always have the question of, I think for most of our organizations, we're maybe giving £100,000 or $100,000 at the most. So that's still just a fraction of most people's total budgets. So a question that I'm really interested in is, how are you going to use these funds? How is this going to help you kind of get to that next stage? And if they're saying, we're just going to use this, we're going to put it all into, these really important shoots or into the edit, and they're not kind of articulating how they're going to pay themselves to give themselves the time, the space, maybe from these freelance jobs that they're doing, things like that. Like that use of funds piece, I think, is really important for us. And you know, the biggest grant that we have is the Diane Wireman Fellowship, which is actually a little bit more geared towards mid-career filmmakers, but it's the same challenges, even for, you know, for filmmakers that have, you know, made 2 or 3 or 4 films. There's still that impulse to just put everything into the project and trust that, you know, the money will come later if you make a big sale or something. But we're finding that is, you know, getting harder and harder to kind of have that payday at the end of the road. So for this first cohort of Diane Wireman Fellows that we supported, you know, a big part of that program was not just the $100,000 grant that each project got, but the time, the 18 months of just mentorship and community that, you know, we tried to sort of build into it so that, you know, they could pay themselves, but also sort of have some sort of structure for going that much deeper into thinking about their project. And I think that that's part of the cost of docs is that the time and space that is necessary for the creative process to unfold.
Yeah, if you're worried about money all the time and you haven't got the space to be creative, there's a problem. And it's interesting, some funds are starting, I don't know whether IDA has this as well, but like Chicken and Egg are now supporting people in their careers. So not necessarily assigned to a project, but people who are in mid-career, women who are in mid-career can actually get support that's unattached to a project to make their lives better, to actually, you know, pay for some of the household costs and so on so that they can have that space. IDA has something similar, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, we have one fund that's unrestricted that goes to female filmmakers, and they have to be working on a project, so it actually ends up at the end of the day that the funds often just go to the project, but the funds can go to whatever. The funds can go to shoes or to a vacation, or, you know, it can really go to whatever. I do think that the one thing we're trying to think a little bit about is how can we build capacity? How can we use funding as a way to build capacity? So if we're giving an unrestricted fund, is there a financial literacy piece that should go along with that? For example, we can't assume that everyone knows how to manage their money. I don't, you know, so it's like, how do we help to the cost of docs, but then also the sustainability, right? To get the practices of sustainability. Yeah.
So before we go to the next question for the panels, I want everybody in the audience to put their hands up if they've ever gone unpaid in the making of a documentary. Look at that. I'm very impressed. There's some people without their hands up. That's brilliant, but most not. So I think that comes back to what Isabel was saying about passion. You know, we do this because we love it and we want to do it. But if we're not sustainable, it's not going to be a long-term career choice, and the world will miss out on our stories. So that's very important. So when we're looking at costs, apart from the fact that you haven't paid for yourselves, is anyone on the panel wanting to kick off with what they've noticed as being new inflationary costs, things that are going up, that people are struggling with? Anybody got anything? I mean, in the survey, we've had quite a lot about travel. There's been an issue. No. Sean?
Yeah, I mean, it's always hard. We're not kind of analyzing the data from our applications in the ways that you are, but I would say anecdotally, certainly travel costs are going up. I think post-production costs, just wages in general, which is a healthy thing for the industry. Yeah. If people, you know, if editors are getting paid more, but then, you know, I think we've seen certainly, you know, from the early days of the streaming boom until now, this, you know, at least in the U.S., you know, budgets going from 500 or 600 or 700,000 to 1 or 1.2 million, you know, and that's a big increase, especially, you know, when as I said, you know, the grants that we're giving are just a small slice of that pie, and then, you know, it's harder and harder for filmmakers to recoup at those higher levels. So, It's,
But
it's
that's why,
yeah.
I mean, funds like us, we wouldn't put money into a £1.2 million budget.
Right.
Because we want to have more of a relationship with the director. So we tend to not fund projects that already are in a big market like that. So,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. And I suppose that's the same with you, isn't it? In your past life.
No recibimos proyectos con presupuestos tan altos, pero en relación a los gastos que han subido, sí, obviamente todo lo que tiene que ver con viajes, pero lo que implica eso es también el acceso que proyectos y realizadores tienen a ir a eventos. Y eventos son los que sirven para colaboraciones, financiamiento y mover. Entonces eso es, y en ese sentido lo que nosotros, porque en relación a lo que decías antes de los resultados, Jane, que de qué manera los fondos han subido los montos que se dan en relación a cómo han subido los gastos de la vida, claro, nosotros no tenemos posibilidad, en el momento que subiéramos los apoyos que damos, tenemos que seleccionar menos proyectos, porque no tenemos el financiamiento. Entonces, lo que hemos desarrollado en los últimos 10 años y ahora forma parte fija de que, claro, damos un apoyo financiero a un proyecto, pero hacemos un intento de apoyar a los proyectos de otra manera, invitándolos a ITFA antes de que terminen la película, cuando están con un proyecto, para que participen en el mercado o en el ITFA Academy, o si quedan seleccionados para ITFA Project Space, que es uno de los talleres internacionales que organizamos, también el fondo paga los gastos de viaje y hotel. Entonces, de esa manera, pero con los gastos como están subiendo, para nosotros también se está poniendo complicado. La cantidad de gente, porque al final lo que hace esto es que empieza a cerrar la cantidad de proyectos o de realizadores que uno apoya.
I would say at Sundance we have a very similar issue, and I know very advanced filmmakers of older ages who've taken out their life savings to finish a film. And if they had the choice, they would still do it like that. What I feel proud of my colleagues and team, we do give a lot of artist support, whether it's a new team or a team with a little bit more experience. If they would like to have maybe an editing consultancy, we sometimes can find funds for that. We will also, in our team, watch rough cuts. All of our team works 100% and plus too. So it's that there's so much, and like as Isabel said, depending on where the money goes, how much then can go to the projects themselves, and that's difficult. A positive is we are able to, this coming next year, increase to $100,000 grants for projects in production and post-production, and up to $100,000, and for development, advanced development, up to $40,000. Also, something with maybe specific, we accept projects from around the world. Some funds have certain restrictions of where they receive the projects from, which countries and filmmakers. We also, it's very different in the US. We have no state funds, we have no national funds for documentaries, and we also have no funding for investigation. So when we say advanced development, we have to see some materials so we know that the project has real viability. I mean, I think for all of us, we want to see with the filmmakers, and we, given our life savings too, the project to be finished. You know, we're not against each other. We're actually really working in solidarity with each other and the filmmakers.
Well, it's great news that you're putting more money in. That's a round of applause. We're getting more money from you, which is very rare in this world. And I think you're right. I mean, none of us who work in this industry are going to be as unfortunate as you to not get paid, because we have got some paid roles. but they're definitely very different from paid roles in commercial television, where some of us may have worked previously. And that's because we care and we want your stories to happen, and we're committed as well. But I'm interested in one of the things that came out of the survey, and I'm certainly finding a lot myself, about power imbalance as well. And also, our funds are very north-based, and, when all the money is in one place and the filmmakers are in a different place, how can we manage to avoid the power imbalance? How can we decolonialize the way we work? And there's no one better to answer this than Keisha.
Me.
Have a microphone.
No, it's a really interesting question. I'm going to wrap it in with what I was going to say about the last question. In the U.S., we're really focused on access. So access, particularly for filmmakers with disabilities and for audiences with disabilities. And so we've really been pushing for this to be a line item in budgets. And that, a lot of the feedback we've gotten, there's a lot of resistance to it. Though I don't think that most documentary filmmakers want to make things more difficult for folks with disabilities, but there's pushback to the idea that this is a US conversation. This isn't a conversation I'm having in my country. So it's interesting sometimes in the effort to be more accessible in one place, you might make things more difficult in another place. And so the idea of kind of power equity, I also want to say, comes up in an interesting way that I found. I'll take Kenya as an example. We work with Kenyan filmmakers a lot. So this is technically, right, a north-south, perhaps, collaboration. And yet sometimes in seeing things kind of as nation states, we can often lose the kind of nuance that's going on inside of a country itself, right? There's a huge class disparity amongst filmmakers in Kenya and from any other country, in the United States as well. So I think it's like, I think you were talking about relationality, and I think that's why a lot of us come here. Already at the Who is Who this morning, I learned so much. It's like to understand with you all what is needed. I would also recommend, I say this, few people take me up on it, but please feel free to tell us what you want, what you need. Like, hey, that thing you said on the panel, don't think it's right. Please, like, if you don't tell me, I don't know. So, like, to really start to have a conversation, like Jane said, we're not TV executives. Like, we are really here in service of this field, and we just want you to talk to us. I think it's really important.
And I didn't pay you to start the audience questions off, but I think that starts the audience questions, unless, Isabel, you have something you're burning to say. So we have time now for some questions from you, or some thoughts from you, or feedback from you. So yes, please, yes.
Sí. Bueno, gracias a la motivación de Keisha y que nos hace esta pregunta. Yo quisiera como un poco contar bien pequeñito mi experiencia. Yo estoy haciendo un documental sobre el cáncer de mama. Es un documental de autorretrato en el que yo me filmo a mí misma durante todo este proceso. Y mi proceso de quimioterapia, o desde que empecé a filmar, fue en la época de pandemia, lo que produjo que toda mi hospitalización sea en solitario. Lo que hizo que yo primero no pueda como estar en una etapa normal de desarrollo ni de producción, porque mientras iba pasando todo el proceso ya como fondos de producción iban pasando. Y también, por ejemplo, en el Instituto de Cine de Ecuador no pude estar en el fondo de producción porque me pedían director de foto, sonido, y yo era la fotógrafa, directora, personaje, actriz, sonidista, todo en el documental. Entonces, el monto solamente para un rol, porque yo no podía ponerme todos los roles, el monto para un rol no podía superar como creo que era el 7% del monto, lo cual no pude acceder al fondo de producción. Y bueno, a lo que voy es que siento que es súper importante también considerar que tal vez sé que es un mínimo, o sea, estoy hablando de algo muy personal, pero sí siento que creo que se debe considerar como este tipo de proyectos de personas con discapacidad, con enfermedades como catastróficas, que los proyectos no esperan, se necesitan hacer y seguir haciendo, y también yo necesito vivir porque estoy pasando por un proceso de un tratamiento muy costoso, que mi prioridad va a ser mi tratamiento, obviamente, pero a pesar de que mi prioridad sea el tratamiento, también mi prioridad es este documental. Y recién tuve una asesoría con Marta Andreu y me preguntaba, ¿por qué de todas las cosas que tú podrías estar haciendo, estás haciendo un documental que de cierta manera me ha traído ha sido muy complejo también para mí sostenerlo justamente porque no he tenido financiamiento?
Thank you for sharing that. And I think this is how we get new ideas in the industry as well, because there is a fund for emergencies when it comes to war and broken down societies, IMS in Denmark, and I'm not aware of a fund that's for an emergency for your own personal medical needs. And these are where we get ideas from. So, that's something we can take back. And I think, Keisha, your fund can help with that.
We did do a lot of research while focusing on disability. And for our funding, disability includes long-term illness, long-term COVID. It's very broadly defined. And one of the things that was really important, and I think this is for funders too, is that actually for people working to make a film who are experiencing a disability or identify as disabled, there's a lot more personal, it's so specific what you might need. And so it takes a lot more time on the funding side, but that's something that if we're serious, right, we can commit to, right, to giving people that time. So I think the thing you raise is really quite interesting, important.
Thank you. Yes, we have a hand up here, just on the second back row.
Bueno, mi pregunta y también experiencia va con el tema del colonialismo que hablaban hace un rato, y es que, bueno, en la crisis financiera que tenemos en países como Colombia para financiar cine, pues hay como dos estrategias que usamos, que una es aplicar a fondos, que sabemos que es complicado, que es una lotería, y lo otro es la coproducción, ¿no? La coproducción con países que tienen los recursos, en su mayoría pues Europa o Estados Unidos. ¿Qué podemos hacer para descolonizarnos cuando el dinero tiene que quedarse en esos lugares y no ser invertidos en el lugar donde se está grabando y en los cargos y las personas que están trabajando en el documental? Eso es como uno de los dilemas más fuertes que estamos encontrando nosotros al acercarnos a una posibilidad de coproducir con Europa, por ejemplo.
I think this is something, just before I pass the mic, that I'm really passionate about, and I'm seeing a lot. And I think that part of the problem is that the value for the originator is not fully realized. So the money goes out to where this small amount of money is coming from to pay their high wages, to do the work, but you're not getting the same value back. So I think maybe there's something in the way that the value is measured. But Bruni, you had something.
Just to add to that, I think it's very important. I've seen it a lot with filmmakers from Lebanon, Tunisia, and where French is spoken. They immediately think a French co-producer can be the answer. And sometimes it can be a wonderful collaboration, and really a collaboration, but sometimes it's not. And what is very important is whenever you before you sign anything is to talk to colleagues, to talk with networks, habla con Conecta, con IDFA, con IDA, and talk to people. Have they worked with this person or this company? How does it work? Because they get the money, but they get the money because it's your project in Tunisia or Latin America. And then it's not dealt with fairly, and then you can go to court, but if the filmmaker from Tunisia has no money to pay himself, this is a dear friend right now who I'm speaking about, but it's really important you have to do that research and really ask people. But there are great European co-producers who really are committed, and I mean, I know a lot in France and other places, but you do have to really investigate and talk to people.
Thank you, and Isabel has something to say.
Sí, podríamos hacer un panel sobre fair co-production. Pero yo creo que también en parte está relacionado a una pregunta que Jane también hacía anteriormente, de cómo cambiar las relaciones, no solo entre coproductores, pero también entre fondos como nosotros con los realizadores que apoyan y esta diferencia en poder. Y mira, empieza por empoderarse a sí mismo y no aceptar, digamos, no asumir que uno no sabe y que el otro va a saber y sabe y tiene una manera de cómo hacer cosas. Y hay que cuestionar. Y también, digamos, lo que decía Bruni, hacer la investigación, el research y darse cuenta y realmente tomar el tiempo para pensar qué son todas las implicaciones de una coproducción. Porque que el productor francés o alemán esté presentando estas exigencias no es porque necesariamente son malas personas, sino porque también tienen que funcionar en una realidad de ellos. Y ahí obviamente se llega al punto muy complicado donde, claro, para mí es muy fácil decir, bueno, en ese momento entonces no acepten ese financiamiento porque va a tener implicaciones que no quieren, pero obviamente está la tentación porque se necesita el dinero. Pero al final, coproducir, para que realmente resulte, es buscar colaboradores que pueden invertir y meterse en un proyecto de una manera similar como la ha hecho uno que ha invertido años y años y años y años. Digamos, el gran cliché es, ¿qué es un matrimonio? Bueno, ¿qué se necesita para que una relación y un matrimonio funcione? Y eso también aplica en el caso de coproducción. Y también a veces va a implicar que uno diga, no quiero ese fondo porque significa que tengo que ceder mis derechos mayoritarios para que el otro pueda acceder. Eso puede ser una respuesta y eso, la implicación va a ser, voy a necesitar 1 o 2 años más para encontrar el financiamiento, pero hay cosas que valen más que otras que yo creo que uno tiene que considerar. Y lo otro es que ahora hay muchos lugares donde se está conversando esto. EAF, que es una organización de training, no sé la palabra, en Europa para productores, acaba de hacer una sesión el año pasado o este año y tienen información en la página web. En la misma página web de IDFA, con el IDFA Bertha Fund desde hace años tenemos un fondo de coproducción y esto nos abrió a esta realidad de la coproducción y hemos empezado también a publicar información en la página web. El próximo año vamos a subir ejemplos de contratos de coproducción para que, digamos, haya este material disponible y uno pueda comparar. Pero todo, digamos, yo creo que empieza por todas las dudas, ponerlo en la mesa y conversarlo. Esa es la manera como uno, como partner en una coproducción, se apodera.
I'd certainly welcome that transparency because it's all done under the covers and no one really knows what's happening. So that's something to look forward to. Paulina, you wanted to ask a question.
Sí, algo que parece sencillo, pero creo que es una limitante, y tomando el tema de la colonización, son los idiomas. O sea, la mayoría de los proyectos, ¿sabes qué me ha pasado? Digo, yo soy agente de ventas, pero me ha pasado de estar apoyando muchos proyectos y no todo el mundo tiene el acceso a poder escribir sus propias ideas o su propia historia en un idioma que no es el nativo. Entonces siento que por parte de los fondos sería un costo muchísimo menor poder incluir, sea del idioma que sea, alguien que pueda leer los proyectos porque tienen que poder escribir sus historias con su propio idioma. Eso es por un lado. Y por otro lado, los abogados también. Creo que la otra vez me hacían muchas consultas no, yo como distribuidora armando estrategias, de presento a este lugar, presento a este otro, tener el derecho a exigir quién está mirando tu proyecto, en qué estado, qué te está ofreciendo, porque muchísimas veces se aplica, no se tiene ningún tipo de conocimiento, se está exponiendo el proyecto y hay un montón de falta de información, como los contratos. Yo abro mis contratos, que no son los mismos los latinos que los europeos, y que no es el mismo hoy que mañana, porque yo vengo de Argentina, donde la inflación es la Argentina igual a inflación. Entonces digo, tengo que estar cambiándolos todo el tiempo y hay como un recelo y un miedo a abrir los contratos. Hay que abrir los contratos, estaría buenísimo si los fondos pueden dar ese apoyo, que tienen más recursos, y lo del idioma me parece que es como algo medio básico, que haría un poquito, o sea, cambiaría realmente, democratizaría muchísimo más el acceso a esta posibilidad de poder aplicar. Eso es como ideas.
With the WICAs, we don't ask anybody to sign a contract unless it's in their own language. So if they want to have it in their language, we get it translated. And also if people want to pitch in their own language, they pitch in their own language. And I think we do need to look at this issue in bigger case. And this lady here has a question in the front row. Oh, and sorry, we're over here. I was looking that way and then we're over here.
Ahora sí. Me voy a hablar en español, pero ya. Yo quiero hablar sobre las etapas, porque yo creo que hay muchos de los documentalistas que siempre están como en desarrollo, en producción, en postproducción, buscando fondos, como es una etapa como siempre estamos en todo y es difícil como decía la señora ahí que a veces tú vas a postular para un fondo y es para producción y tú tienes que pensar es difícil saber la etapa, eso una cosa que muchas personas habla de etapa como ficción tiene esa etapa, pero documentalistas muchas veces son haciendo todo el tiempo.
Thank you. It's a good point. Yes, and just this in the front row here.
Sí, realmente tengo una pregunta que siento que expande un diálogo un poco más amplio, que es con esto del imbalance de poder en el sur global. No todos somos iguales en el sur global y como mencionaba también Kisha, dentro de los mismos países no somos iguales. Pero en un contexto en que, por ejemplo, sabemos que hay países en Centroamérica que no tienen ley de cine, que no tienen Ministerio de Cultura, que tienen tal vez fondos muy limitados o no tienen fondos, ¿cuál es una forma que ustedes hacen para poder tratar de mantener en la mira los países que de verdad sin este financiamiento no pueden hacer ninguna película? Yo sé que es complicado porque en el sur global creo que todos estamos constantemente buscando financiamiento y viendo cómo hacemos las cosas, en especial en documental, pero desde mi experiencia, desde Centroamérica me ha tocado ver a tantas personas del Caribe incluso como que realmente el hacer cine no se vuelve una fuente de ingreso en ningún mundo, sino que más bien es una pasión que seguimos siempre con un trabajo permanente de 8 horas para poder contar las historias que tenemos que contar, porque si no, no nos podemos ver representados y representadas.
I think if we did a survey of the audience about the second jobs that everybody has, we'd have quite a large variety here, from care worker who I met earlier who's making a film to somebody who obviously makes things commercially for natural history and so on, and that will be the same in many parts of the world. But I think that South-South co-productions are interesting. There are places in the South where there is money, and I think I'm very keen to see some more of that. I think that would be exciting. Bruni?
To go back to the question, for the Sundance Fund, you can apply and say, we're at advanced development, we're also filming now, and you can say that, but it's also shown within the application. it has to be written, it has to be shown, so we say, yeah, it really is in these stages. Let's have a conversation, let's go from there. Something that Keisha said, which I think is very true, we all are very human. And we do responder a todos los emails, no cada semana, pero sí, y es una conversación, y es difícil, pero una conversación. Y con la pregunta sobre, sí, en realidad los fondos internacionales necesitan aplicaciones en inglés. Para mí, creo que una sugerencia es que escribe en su propio idioma y hacer un intercambio de, no sé, de voluntario o de dinero o de una cena para que tienen buena capacidad con inglés. No hay una fórmula perfecta, pero cada y cada, etapa y etapa.
I mean, I feel like there's a few different threads of conversation around, language access and power and co-production. I mean, we're a very small organization, but we have prioritized building an international programming team, which is still a small group of people, but we have native Spanish speakers, native Arabic speakers, and that helps us to kind of, read materials from certain parts of the world in people's native languages, but not every part of the world. And I do think it's interesting to, think about what kind of tools or processes we could build to break down those barriers of language access and still find ways of supporting filmmakers, but also bringing them into community. I mean, most of what we do involves flying filmmakers to the United States and creating these sort of retreat experiences where there's mentorship and feedback, and in those spaces, that's a whole other challenge besides the application piece. But I wanted to address the question around sort of north-south and various configurations of co-productions. We have definitely supported multiple filmmakers coming from various global south contexts that are going into to Europe or coming to the U.S. and looking to form these transnational collaborations. I think to build on everything everybody else said, it's so important to just get to know the individuals. Maybe this is what you were speaking to as well, like the different producers in Europe have a different analysis of the sort of extractive or colonial kind of defaults that are built into some of these structures, and we've certainly found in building our networks with various producers that some of them are able to work within that system and kind of push against those defaults. Others are just sort of really just following the logic of the system and just kind of accepting it more than it should be. So I think it's really important that whoever you work with, if you are kind of approaching global north co-productions, that there's an analysis of those power structures to begin with.
Lots of hands going up, so we'll take two in one go. So sí. And then two more questions, like both in this row, and then we'll answer. Hello.
Hola, hi Jane. Tengo una pregunta que siempre me la hago, sobre todo al empezar un proyecto. Sabemos que todas las etapas de los proyectos nos cuestan mucho financiar, pero para empezar, para arrancar el proyecto es la parte cuando más nos cuesta, sobre todo por lo que acaban de decir, que para los fondos es importante demostrar el acceso y demostrar que hemos arrancado y que quieren ver unos visuales, obviamente de buena calidad y un acceso demostrable. Eso requiere una inversión grande de tiempo y de trabajo y conseguir un equipo de trabajo. Entonces, ningún fondo contempla un gasto retroactivo, pagar un trabajo que ya se hizo. Entonces, normalmente ese es el problema con que me he encontrado, de no poder empezar porque no tengo el tiempo, no tengo el equipo para poder tener y demostrar ese acceso. Normalmente los documentales en los que trabajo están fuera de mi ciudad, entonces requieren viaje, requieren equipo técnico, humano, mi propio tiempo, mi propia investigación. Y entonces ese primer arranque es el que no hay fondos y nadie los repone luego. Entonces esa es una pregunta con la que siempre me encuentro de cómo costear ese primer momento para poder participar en los fondos de inicio.
You start in deficit, yes. And just pass along to the lady to
Qué bueno que fuimos juntos porque está directamente relacionado y es que tengo una idea que se las quiero contar y ustedes me dirán si es muy mala o muy buena. En general, los fondos que ustedes trabajan y aportan suelen ser altamente competitivos. Por lo tanto, la gente que llega a ganarlos probablemente tuvo un trabajo profesional muy arduo. Entonces, sería interesante quizás que parte, un porcentaje de esos fondos, se entregue en formato de premio, de manera que eso sea directamente para el equipo, para que pueda repartirlo, pagárselo, pagar sus deudas que a lo mejor incurrió para llegar a ese material de tan buena calidad que permitió acceder a ese fondo. Lo digo porque acá en Chile en algún momento tuvimos un fondo que entregaba, era otra figura porque permitía una ganancia para la empresa, digamos, y eso se eliminó entendiendo que el productor tiene que vender su producto. Nosotros entendemos que nuestras inversiones en general no son económicas, son más bien culturales. Nosotros estamos aportando otra cosa, no solo valor económico. Entonces quizás sería interesante, ya que tengo el placer de hablar con personas que trabajan los fondos más relevantes del mundo, pensar una figura así donde pudiésemos pagarnos a modo de premio quizás, o como a lo mejor hay una mejor palabra, a esas personas que con su talento y trabajo lograron ganarse esos fondos tan altamente competitivos. Una idea.
Oh, I love all these ideas. Good. So, Isabel, can you see the future for that?
No creo que entendí bien. Tú dices adicional al fondo que se ganen. Ya, fuera del fondo que ya se están ganando. Yeah. Sí, podría ser eso. Digamos, yo cuando oigo aquí los montos que dan en Estados Unidos, bajan unos celos, porque lo máximo que damos nosotros son 25.000 euros. Y preferiría, yo creo, aumentar eso si hubiera la posibilidad financiera para... justamente nosotros también en todo lo, digamos, hay ciertos requisitos y eso va a la pregunta anterior. Sí, nosotros también ponemos como condición que si alguien se gana el fondo solo se puede gastar en gastos que están hechos a partir de la fecha límite. Entonces todo lo que uno invierte antes no va a ser cubrido por la contribución que haga, el apoyo que demos nosotros. Pero en el caso nuestro, yo creo que en desarrollo damos 7.500 euros, no es nada. Yo preferiría aumentar esos montos para que justamente se pudiera usar en poner todos los salarios en el presupuesto que hacer como una construcción así.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say, I think this is a good place to end. I think this is addressing more than one thing because I think that it's important for us to think about what funds and philanthropy can do and then also what we can't do. Because what I'm hearing here is universal basic income for artists, right? You should get paid from the government that has a lot more money than anybody up here to be able, you know, to support your work. And we don't have this in the US either, and it's something that we talk about a lot. There are certain organizations, there's an organization in Lebanon called Aflamuna that's been thinking a lot about this. And the question really is, I mean, this is something that maybe we all as a field, international fields, can come together and think about. Anyway, lots more to say about that, but I will stop.
We've run out of time, but you've been amazing and we've got so many good ideas. And thank you to everybody on the panel for your generosity and warmth as well. We need that in the industry. It doesn't cost anything to be nice. So we're standing in the way of your lunch and your bellies and your food, so that's too important. Thank you to Connecta for allowing us to have this conversation, and see you later.
Gracias Jane, gracias Kisha, gracias Bruni, gracias Sean y Isabel, y gracias a todos y todas por estar acá. Cerramos el panel. Gracias.